We are swiftly approaching the end of the list. Second to last, the penultimate class that we are discussing is, of course, the Warlock. I already made a video about the Warlock. It was my second video in this series. And so if you've seen that, you know that I don't have a lot to say about changing the Warlock. As far as 5th edition class design goes, I think the Warlock is as good as it gets. You've got lots of choices. Now, is it perfect? No. There's the common 5th edition design traps included. There are some mandatory choices if you want to be optimal. There are some choices that are just really bizarrely useless. I'm personally not a big fan of ribbon features existing at all. I think that, or at least not taking up any design space. If you want to add them on as flavor text to other things, I think that's cool. But being their own features just sort of takes up space in the book that doesn't need to be there. So here's the deal. Warlocks have a couple of problems. So if I were redesigning the Warlock, I wouldn't do a lot, to be honest. It would mostly be just adjustments, balance changes, and that kind of thing. I would probably make Agonizing Blast a default thing, it doesn't take up an invocation slot. But I actually really like the idea of invocations and pact boons. It's your pact type and your patron, your pact boon and your patron. So pact of the blade, pact of the tome, etc. And then which patron you pick. And then you also are picking invocations. I like all those things. These different layers of customization where you can mix and match at each layer to create a fairly unique type of character. I think that's aces. I said before that the Warlock is the best design class in 5th edition. I stand by that. That is still true. So what would I change? Well, I think the biggest drawback of the Warlock is, of course, its reliance on the short rest. And it is not fully unique in that respect, but it definitely relies more on the short rest than any other class, which means that if you are in a party with a bunch of other people who don't care about short rests, is your party going to be taking short rests? Maybe not. The short rest in 5th edition is really, really awkward. So part of redesigning the Warlock is redesigning the short rest. I see no reason why the short rest needs to be an hour. I think 5 minutes is a much better mechanic. It allows you to sort of assume a short rest in between every encounter, which means that the frequency with which they occur is much more reliable. And when you only have 1 or 2 spell slots, you probably want to be able to use those every encounter, right? Instead of just being relegated to Eldritch Blast every single turn, because you don't know if you're going to be getting a short rest next. Or maybe you actually didn't, and you were fully out of spell slots because you haven't had a chance to take an hour rest. So you're just on Eldritch Blasts. That's not particularly engaging gameplay. One thing that I think I would want to reintroduce is unique cantrips, unique at-will attacks for each type of patron. So 4th edition, all Warlocks got Eldritch Blast, but they also got their other at-will ability was determined by which type of pact they picked. Infernal, Fey, Stars, Dark, I forget what some of the other pacts were. Which patron you picked gave you an extra at will, not an extra, but it determined which second at will you got. And I think that's a really cool idea. Reintroducing that is super easy in 5th edition. You just come up with a new cantrip for every patron. And there aren't that many. There's 6, 8, something like that. There's not that many. A new cantrip for each patron that you get automatically, in addition to Eldritch Blast, which, by the way, also Eldritch Blast should not be one of your cantrip picks because it should be automatic. It's such a formality. It's the ability to not take Eldritch Blast is a trap option. So you get Eldritch Blast automatically. You get a second patron-specific cantrip automatically, and there's no other way to get that cantrip. You have to be of the correct patron. And each one would evoke the sort of identity of the patron. So the Infernal or what's it called? The Fiend Pact would be, something fire related, something kind of insidious feeling. The Fey Pact. The Fey Pact ability in 4th edition was Eye Bite, which made you invisible to the target, which I think is just a really cool ability, because and that I don't think exists in 5th edition, to be invisible to a specific creature. You either are invisible or you are not. I just think it's a really evocative ability. Like you just sort of cloak their perception of you specifically, and you are invisible to them for a turn. I think that's really cool. I bring that kind of stuff back. A little bit more. I like that warlocks of different patrons should feel quite different. And so more of that kind of stuff I would probably emphasize. The other thing is, I kind of want to say that, and I'm not sold on this. But I would look for a way to bring back the different ability score for casting for warlocks, because a 4th edition warlock was either charisma based or constitution based, depending on which pact they picked. So I think that's kind of a neat ability. A constitution based caster is a cool thing, and then intelligence was their secondary stat, so certain spell effects would scale based on their intelligence, and then that's not really necessarily a workable thing in 5th edition. That's not the way that spells are built, so probably you have to discard that, or make intelligence, constitution, or charisma the 3 different abilities, like your spellcasting abilities based on which pact you pick. And so like it would just scale that way. So you could have intelligence-based warlocks, you could have constitution-based warlocks, you could have charisma-based warlocks. The issue with that, of course, that you have to be careful about is that in 5th edition, a constitution-based warlock would be the best warlock, because constitution is an important saving throw, and intelligence and charisma are not important saving throws. So they would need something to make up for that. And I've got into this before. I don't remember in which video. I know I've talked about this before, where in 4th edition, if one stat is better for a specific purpose than another, and a character class gives you the option to focus on either one, the one that is less will get an ability that brings it back up to baseline. The example at the top of my head is that the Cosmic Sorcerer, or like the different types of sorcerers, like you can be either a strength secondary or a dex secondary. The strength secondary sorcerers get an additional ability that lets them use strength for AC, because otherwise you would only ever pick dex sorcerers, because AC is such an important stat. You wouldn't want to dump that. So that kind of thing, where you would need to, for the intelligence and charisma warlocks, you would probably want to just sort of pretty directly say that if you would make a constitution save, you can use your spellcasting ability instead. That kind of thing. To help balance that out, so that there is, like, even in that case, constitution is still best, because it pours into hit points. So, like, something to sort of reset that baseline there. But I do kind of like the idea of using different ability scores for spellcasting based on which pact you're using. That's a neat ability, or that's a neat design feature. That and unique cantrips, putting a few things into baseline warlock instead of making it take up a selection, like a cantrip selection or a invocation selection. So yeah, but I mean, like, the majority of it would just be adjustments. Just like little quality of life things. Yeah. Oh, the other thing so I don't like the idea of the Mystic Arcanums. Now, I have said in the other videos, on my the other redesign videos, I don't like the idea of 6th level spells and higher even existing in the first place. I think they're bad for the game. So I don't think Mystic Arcanums need to exist. I would find something else to replace them with. I don't have anything in mind off the top of my head, but they don't need to exist. I don't think 6th level and above spells are good for the game, and I would be removing them if I were to redesign all the classes. So there's that. Spell progression stops at 5th, and that's all there is. So yeah, that's my redesign of the Warlock. I mean, like, there's not a lot to, like, calling it a redesign actually feels like a bit of an overstatement. It's how I would adjust the Warlock, really. because it's mostly in a good state. It is, I think, by a wide margin, the best design class in 5th edition. It's so customizable. It has so much inherent expandability. Like if you put out books for that expand player options, the Warlock is probably the easiest to expand because you can just put out new spells. Warlock can get spells. Put out new invocations. They can just pick those alongside their other invocations. You can put new patrons. Is pretty easy. I mean, those are just subclasses, and they do those already. It's so easy to customize and to expand upon. It's you know what it is? It's built forward compatible is what they've inherently built it to be expandable and robust for future design. They've left themselves like little access ports to adjust and enhance and modify this class in ways that other classes don't. Not even spellcasters. Because yeah, you can always print new spells, but beyond that, how do you expand the class? Subclasses? Subclasses are not a great way to expand on a class's options. It's certainly not a great way to patch a class, because you put out like, oh, this class is weak, let's give it a new subclass. That's better. Well, now that's power creep, and players don't like power creep, and so they're going to sort of reject that. You know, see things like the Tunnel Fighter or the Echo Knight. These things are more powerful than previous options, therefore they are seen as power creep, therefore they are rejected by the community at large. Despite the fact that they are pretty unambiguously like balance patches to try to push the fighter in the correct direction, because the fighter is underpowered compared to average class power. The Warlock doesn't have that issue, because it's pretty well balanced. It's actually like almost direct center. I think I usually put the Warlock at B tier, which is where you want to be, to be honest. Like, it's not overpowered, it's not underpowered. It's kind of the baseline average class. But even if it were overpowered or underpowered, they have ways of sort of like getting in there and accessing and like, you know, moving the little levers and changing the knobs and adjusting the individual components to patch this class or to expand this class. And I think that's just really good design. So I don't know who wrote the Warlock, but good job. So yeah, I wouldn't change much, but I would probably add I would do some quality of life changes and probably just add a little bit of content, because in general, I think 5th edition characters are kind of starved for content to begin with, unless you're a full caster. So, and Warlocks are not full casters. They are below full casters, above half casters. So I would, like a 3/4 caster. I'd also change short rests to be more used, because they're not usually used that much in my experience. And even if they are, it is inconsistent from table to table. That's the other big problem with short rests. Some tables do them, some tables don't. And I would want the assumed play experience for a class to be a lot more consistent than that. Right? So that's how I would do the Warlock. Not a lot. It's in a pretty good state. But the next video is Wizard. Oh boy.